seven figures of coverage. So in the event the at-fault doesn't have enough coverage, you may have a minimum limits UIM policy, but you have catastrophic injury. If we're able to get to a bar situation where they were overserved, well, now you have coverage for your claim.
Absolutely. And you're even in better shape if you carry a UIM as well.
When we represent a motorcyclist, oftentimes these are catastrophic injuries. And when we say catastrophic, we're usually dealing with head injuries.
Right.
So it's very, very important that a client, if they suffered any kind of head trauma in regards to their motorcycle accident, that they get the care that they need. The hard part is a lot of bikers are tough, right?
Right.
And they don't always complain immediately about symptoms that they're having. Now, if it's a severe catastrophic accident, I think that's kind of easy because it kind of speaks for itself. But where we can really add value to the claim, and when bikers realize they only got one shot at this when they try to settle their case, is we have to really work up the traumatic brain injury, or the MTBI, the mild traumatic brain injury workup.
Sometimes that takes some time, and I know when people, especially motorcyclists, they're tough, that you get put back together, and surgeons put you all back together, and you go home and you want to get this over with. But it takes a little while for those traumatic brain injury symptoms to actually reveal themselves and appear. They don't always show up right away, or the injured motorcyclist doesn't notice about themselves that they're having these symptoms for a little bit of time. So it really takes time. You don't want to move too quick.
But again, I'm here with Sarah Austin. I'm Justin Lovely. We're kind of telling you the ins and outs of Bike Week, the rallies, safety issues, motorcycle coverage that you need to have, must have. And Sarah was just telling us about brain injuries and kind of how we work up our cases. One of the things she mentioned was, being tough and not really telling the doctor what's going on. And it's very, very important that that's part of your medical record. So in our office, we have a 21-point brain injury analysis. Not only to bring our checklist here, just to talk to you about this, Sarah, because we've trained our team to be on the lookout for this,
right,
especially for our motorcycle clients. If there's ever any kind of head trauma at all, we need to make sure this is documented. People need to remember this too. When you're taken to the emergency room, they're there to make sure you're not going to die on them. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, so, then they kick you out.
Yeah, then they kick you out. Essentially, exactly. And you have to advocate for yourself and make sure that your symptoms that you're having are part of your medical record. Now, with head trauma, this doesn't always happen on day one, right? Your adrenaline's pumping. You're not having these issues. You may go in, maybe you even suffered some broken bones, but you're released. Or
maybe you're having a headache, right? But your headache is not, you don't even feel your headache because you're on all the pain medicine.
Right.
Because they just put your arm back together.
And you're really left having to fend for yourself. So that's why we've developed this brain injury checklist that our staff is trained on every 90 days. Well, at the 90-day mark, at the 90-day mark post injury, we make sure that 21 possible symptoms of head trauma are documented so that we can tell you, hey, you need to go see a neuro, or hey, go back to your primary care physician.
You need to tell somebody.
And advocate for yourself. And when we have these checklists filled out, we always want to talk to your spouse or somebody close to you, maybe even a coworker, your kids, whoever can attest to this, and not you, the injured person, because you may not even be aware that you're having these symptoms.
Right. And what are some of the symptoms that people might not notice about themselves?
Yeah, so and the key is that these will not rear their heads with a brain injury, usually a few months down the road. So that's what people need to understand. So you might think, hey, I'm fine. Maybe you were dazed, maybe you even diagnosed with a concussion, and then 90 days later, these symptoms start popping up. So we're asking, hey, did you lose any consciousness? Well, that's the easy one. Did you black out? Did you hit your head? Are you suffering from amnesia, short-term or long-term? You just can't remember anything. Headaches, it's a huge one, right? So how often are you having them? Of course, in seizures, that would be a telltale sign of head trauma. So if you've never had any kind of issues like that, then all of a sudden, a couple months down the road, you think you're fine. Maybe you hurt your arm, your leg, that heals up, and then out of nowhere, you're going back to the ER with a seizure. I mean, probably suffered some major head trauma, and that's something that we need to bring aware and get put on the medical record about the motorcycle accident.
Yeah, a lot of people don't realize that those things are related, because there is a lot of time sometimes between when the symptoms show up, and going through this really helps us say, well, you are having these issues. Those all could be related, and some people are surprised to find out they could be related, and they do follow up with their doctors, and they end up in the neurologist and the neuropsychologist finding that out.
Yeah, and they'll talk to our staff, and they'll say, "Oh, well, that's not related." Yeah, I went back to the doctor, but that's not related. When we're doing our follow-ups, and when we do this checklist, we're like, "Whoa, wait a minute! If we see 1, 2, 3, or 4 items on this 21-point analysis, we need to get them into a neurologist."
Right. Or at least get it checked out to make sure it is not related to this accident, or it is related to the accident. You want to know. You only get one shot. We want to make sure that we've got everything documented.
Oh, yeah.
Going through our checklist, the fifth thing we look at is sound and light sensitivity. So if all of a sudden, a few months down the road, you can't, lights will set you off, and you can't stand LED lights. That's a big one that we see. You have to always be in the dark to work, or you can't look at your computer screen for long periods of time.
Right. We'll get people who were working from home so successfully on their computers all day to, they lost a promotion because they just can't work for that long anymore. And that's when they need to get stopped up when we find out things like that.
Yeah. Nausea, vomiting. We'll have clients that a few months down the road, they're having unexplained nausea. It's just debilitating. Sleep disturbance, having trouble falling asleep, staying asleep, or sleeping too long. A lot of different ways that can rear its head. Vertigo, lightheadedness, any kind of other balance problems, coordination problems, generalized weakness. You'll say, "Hey, I don't have such a strong grip anymore." We've had people who they've always worked out, always been very healthy, and then all of a sudden they can't, pick up the groceries and take them into the house. Numbness, visual disturbance. So people will have to start wearing glasses out of the blue, and they'll say, "Oh, my vision's going." Well, did you suffer some sort of head trauma back in your accident? Let's get it documented. Tinnitus, loss of smell or taste, body temperature control. So if you find yourself, I'm freezing all the time, or I'm hot all the time, or I'm hot when it's cold, I'm cold when it's hot, that's a problem. Emotional signs, symptoms. If you notice a loved one, who was recently in an accident, and they're just not the same person anymore, they're very having anger issues, irritation, frustration, they're worried all the time, or they're falling into a depression. Well, that's obviously symptoms that we can tie back usually to head trauma.
Yeah, and these ones, the emotional symptoms and the cognitive symptoms, those are the ones where normally the motorcyclist or injured person has the most difficulty explaining what's going on, and those are the symptoms. You can say, "I've been throwing up, I have worse headaches, I have seizures now," and you can give that history yourself. But as far as I'm more anxious, I walk into a room, I forget what I'm doing. I'm angry all the time. Anger is a big one that we see a lot. It's the spouse, it's your mom, it's your sibling that notices that about you more than you're ready to notice it about yourself, and especially the anger one. The forgetfulness. I'll talk to somebody's wife whose husband's been in an accident, and she's just like, "I can't even get along with them," and it's a lot of times related to the concussion.
Yeah, and so we'll have cases where none of that is in the initial medicals. Okay, none of that is, and so it's important that we do a proper investigation and say, is there any evidence at all of some kind of head trauma? Is there a broken windshield? Is there a scratched helmet in the case of a motorcyclist? Anything at all, because it may or may not be documented in those initial EMS or ER records. And if we don't get this document put in the medical record, what I say or what Sarah says, even what the client says, means nothing. I mean, it's got to be what your doctor, your treating physician say. So it's very, very, very important.
I tell my clients, if it's not in the medical records, the insurance company is going to say it didn't happen. So you've got to go, and that's where I think it's hard for clients. You have to go, you have to complain about everything. You've got to take your wife with you so she can tell the doctor how you're acting at home so you can really get the treatment. And I think also not just documenting it for your case, but a lot of people have these symptoms and they feel like there's nothing anybody can do for my head injury. There's nothing anybody can do that will make me less angry or have less headaches. It's just how it's going to be now. And, Justin, and if you research, you go all over the country, what kind of treatments are they able to do for people now?
Well, there's cutting edge treatments. I mean, they're doing bariatric chamber treatments now. Out of San Diego, we go to TBI Med Legal every year, and we try to say, hey, what's the cutting edge treatment? Not just legal strategies, but what's the cutting edge treatments that we can try to get our clients into a specialist? We've got the Shepherd Center pretty close. It's 5 hours away. But that's another issue, is don't give up. These neuros here, at least in South Carolina and in Myrtle Beach area, it's hard to get an appointment. So it might take you, 90 days to even see somebody. So we need some sort of documentation with your primary care physician or whoever it may be, and then you're right, Sarah. Don't give up. Can we get you into a specialist? Does the case warrant you going to some of these cutting edge medical providers in Atlanta or California? But if you don't complain and we don't get it documented, we can't really help them.
Right. And there's cognitive therapy, speech therapy, vestibular therapy.
Yeah.
And you hurt your arm, you get surgery, you're going to do physical therapy for your arm. You hurt your brain, there's a bunch of therapies now that you can do to kind of get yourself back to normal, and you don't have to live like this forever. And I think that's really important. It gives people hope. It's important for your case, but it's also important for yourself, because if you don't get those treatments, and if you don't get them early enough, you are going to have to live with it forever.
Yeah. All right, well, that's enough. Let's recap. We're giving